The glass cup fell from my son's hand and broke into a million pieces on the floor. "What did you just say?" Marcus yelled at the lawyer. The lawyer said it again. "The $92 million goes to Mrs. Rose Thompson." That's me. The old lady they thought was too dumb to understand anything was about to get all their money. But how did a grandma they treated like garbage beat a whole family of greedy people? Sometimes the smartest person in the room is the one everyone ignores. My son said, "Don't expect a dime from Dad's $92 million. At the will reading, he turned pale when he heard my name. Is that old lady even awake? I thought she would die soon. Maybe we should check if she's still breathing," Marcus said with a mean laugh. Those nasty words hit me like a punch as I walked down the stairs. I was still wearing my black dress from my husband's funeral. I still smelled like the roses from his grave. My family couldn't even wait for the dirt to dry on his grave before they came back to our house in Miami to steal everything. This wasn't about being sad. This was about getting rich. The house was full of loud voices, mean laughter, and expensive shoes walking all over my clean floors. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, holding onto the railing my husband built with his own hands. I watched them take apart my whole life like hungry wolves. "This is mine now," my grandson Tyler shouted, putting a bright green sticker on the big old clock, then on the leather chair, then on the cabinet with our good dishes. He acted like he was shopping and everything was free. His sister Emma pointed her phone at the wall with some computer app that measured things. "We'll tear this wall down when she's gone," she said like I wasn't even there. "Maybe put in a big TV room with better speakers." I just stood there. Nobody gave me a chair. Nobody stopped talking about stealing my stuff. Then my daughter-in-law Brittany came out with a tray full of fancy wine glasses. "We're celebrating Dad's success," she said with a fake smile. "He built a huge business empire, and now we get to make it even bigger. And get rid of the old junk," someone said from across the room. Everyone laughed like it was the funniest joke ever. My chair at the dinner table was gone. They put an old broken folding chair there instead. It wobbled and had no cushion. They told me to sit in the laundry room instead. "You'll be happier in there, away from all the noise." I sat by myself, looking at a mop bucket and a broken vacuum, eating dry chicken and mushy potatoes from a paper plate. Nobody looked at me. Nobody cared. From the other room, I could hear them planning. "This house smells like old people and sadness," said one voice. "Let's rip down the wallpaper and change everything in the kitchen." My grandson put a bright orange sticker on the old wooden table next to me. "This one's mine." He smiled like he just won a prize. His sister came in with her phone, using some app to scan the room. "We'll change this room when she moves out," she said, spinning around. "Maybe a yoga room or a place to taste wine." They talked loud. They didn't even look at me. I sat very still, holding my tea with both hands so it wouldn't shake. "Dad said she would die first," someone said. I guess that was the only thing he got wrong. "She just made soup. He made millions," someone else said, and everyone laughed louder. "Let her sit with her old pictures," a cousin said meanly. "She doesn't even know what year it is." "Can we take her money if we get her mail?" My granddaughter joked. "She's basically dead already," her brother said. "Let's just put her in the garden shed and forget about her." I ate a bite of cold chicken. It tasted like cardboard. I swallowed it anyway. I didn't say anything. I didn't fight back. But I touched the piece of paper hidden in my sweater pocket, a paper I had kept safe for years. It was an important bank paper, signed and stamped from 19 years ago. It said I was a partner and first investor in the family business. My name was written there in blue ink, not black, the kind of detail that matters when lawyers get involved. They didn't know about it. They never asked. 19 years ago, when the company was losing all its money and about to close forever, it wasn't lawyers or money experts who saved everything. It was me. I sold every piece of jewelry I owned, my grandmother's diamond necklace, my wedding pearls, even the pretty pin I wore when we got engaged. I did it all in secret. I didn't tell anyone. I just sent the money to my husband and whispered, "Use this, but never tell them where it came from." He didn't ask questions. Until now, he never told them the truth. I could hear my son's voice from the next room. "We'll get the beach house. The fancy car is already in my name, anyway." "The expensive watches are mine," someone else said. "Dad promised them to me last Christmas." "I want the designer purses," the youngest said. "Even if they belong to her, she doesn't use them anymore." More mean laughter. They were giving away my things while I was still alive. One person came into the laundry room, looked surprised to see me still sitting there, and said, "There's water in the garage fridge. Maybe you should drink some. You look sick." Then he left without waiting for me to answer. I sat there for another hour while they took my art, my property, my memories. Someone even brought suitcases upstairs, taking over my bedroom for the weekend. One of the girls asked if she could paint it pink. Finally, the wine was gone and the music stopped, but the feeling of greed was still thick in the air. I stood up slowly. My knees hurt. I held onto the sink and looked out the small window. The flowers my husband planted by the driveway were dying. Nobody had watered them in days. I wondered if anyone even noticed. I walked back into the house. Nobody asked where I had been. My footsteps were quiet, like the ghost they thought I already was. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I held a paper in my pocket, now warm from my hand. Let them drink. Let them plan. Let them laugh. The will reading was coming, and I had a heartbeat, strong, steady, and ready to fight. They see me now like I'm garbage, a useless old woman, a shadow in their perfect story of business success. But there's a part of the story they erased because it didn't fit what they wanted to believe. The part where I saved everything and nobody ever knew. 19 years ago, the company was falling apart. I remember how my husband came home late, tie loose, hands shaking, too upset to talk. He didn't need to explain. The bank had called. The numbers were terrible. They were about to lose everything, the business, the contracts, even our house. "We just need one big deal," he said, staring into the fireplace like he could burn away his shame. "Just one. If we can close with those investors from Dallas, everything will be okay." But there was a problem. To get the deal, he needed money up front. Money he didn't have and was too proud to ask for. So, I made a choice. That night while he slept, I took out the jewelry box from the back of our dresser. Inside were the last pieces of my family's treasures, the diamond earrings from our wedding, the emerald ring from my grandmother, the heavy gold bracelets I wore when I first came to this house as a new wife. Every piece had memories, and I sold them all quietly, without asking, without telling. I sent the money straight to the company the next morning and told him only this: use it. Don't let them see you fail. He didn't ask where the money came from. He didn't want to know. That was his way, strong on the outside, quiet on the inside. And I stayed hidden. The deal closed 2 days later. The investors signed. The company lived. They called him smart. They called him a business genius. They never mentioned me. But that wasn't the part that hurt most. A month later, I saw the new company ads. His picture was big on the front, with words underneath. Success built alone. I smiled when I saw it, bit my lip, said nothing. But I remembered. I remembered everything. Even the night I wrote the business plan by hand. He was getting ready for another meeting with investors and didn't know what to say. The market was changing. The business world was different, and he was still talking like it was 10 years ago. So after everyone went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with some tea and started writing. I wrote out a big plan with many steps based on new business ideas, guessed how much money they could make, and made a plan that could grow with changes in how people buy houses. I had done this before in another life, before marriage, before kids, before my business card said housewife. That night, I signed the papers with a fake name nobody would know. A pen name, something safe, something clean. And the next morning, I put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and mailed it to the office. No return address, just his name and the company address. He got it 3 days later. At dinner that night, he talked about a mystery letter. Someone sent an idea nobody signed, he said, laughing. It's really smart. Even the handwriting looks like yours. I shrugged and kept stirring the soup. That plan became the base of their big success 6 months later. It brought in over $46 million in new money. They put up a sign in the lobby, inspired by new ideas. His ideas. But I didn't mind. Not then. I told myself the family needed one hero, and it was better to let him be it. It's funny how women are taught to disappear nicely, to be proud of being the foundation, while someone else gets the credit. We're told that quiet loyalty is good, that giving up things is strength. But being quiet too long makes people forget you exist. And now they walk through my house, putting their names on furniture, talking about success like I was never part of it. Now they laugh at my memory, question my brain, make fun of my worth. They don't know what I gave, what I built, what I hid. But there's a folder upstairs in my closet, under sheets nobody ever touches. Inside is the original copy of that plan, ink a little smudged from a night of hard writing. My fake name in the corner. Folded next to it is a letter from the patent office, papers that connect the business plan to registered smart property. Registered not under the company, but under me. I never cashed the money checks. They come every 3 months, have for years. I never needed the money. I needed the quiet. I needed the dignity of knowing what I had done, even if nobody else did. But now they've gone too far. They fed me shame. They took away my identity. They called me dead, while I still breathed. So I've opened the folder again. I've called the lawyer. I've hired the handwriting expert. I've written down everything. Not for revenge, not even for fairness, but for truth. Because when they sit in that room, and the will is read, and they hear my name connected not just to the money, but to the success they thought was theirs alone, there will be silence. For once, I will be loud, and none of them will be able to erase me again. They didn't even look at me when they did it. It was a Thursday, 9 days after the funeral. The house still smelled a little like flowers and wood from the funeral. Someone had left the sympathy cards on the piano, not opened, like even being sad was too much work. But their mood had changed. The sadness was over. Now came the sorting, the taking, the clearing. And the clearing started with me. We've decided, said my son Marcus, not trying to be quiet. She can move to the small room downstairs. I blinked. The laundry room. Well, it's a utility room, he said with a forced smile, but there's room for a bed. My bedroom, our bedroom, was already taken. I could hear noise upstairs. Drawers being pulled open, closet doors creaking. Someone was dragging suitcases down the hall. My perfume bottles, my silk scarves, my books, they were being put into cardboard boxes. Not carefully, not lovingly, just thrown away. I walked slowly toward the stairs and saw labels stuck to the boxes. Giveaway. Another. Old stuff. A third. Grandma junk. They didn't even try to hide the labels. Marcus's wife, Jessica, was holding a clipboard and pointing at furniture like someone directing movers. That small table is perfect for the lake house, she told her husband. Put a sticker on it. A bright pink sticky note appeared like a bruise on the wood. This one's mine. I watched as my history was taken piece by piece. The wedding dishes, the rocking chair where I took care of my son when he was sick, even the old music player we danced to when the power went out. Everything was now marked with those happy tags. Marcus turned to me with that sharp, fake smile he used like armor. She doesn't need much, he said to the group. Just a place to sleep until, you know. A few uncomfortable laughs followed. Nobody disagreed. One of the younger boys, Kyle, I think, though I can't keep track anymore, whispered something as he passed the kitchen door. If we keep her address, we can still take her Social Security money. They thought that was funny too. I didn't. I just walked slowly, knees hurting, to what used to be the laundry room. It smelled like soap and mold. One light bulb flickered overhead. There was a plastic bucket in one corner and a dirty sink. A small bed had been pushed against the wall. No sheets, just an old blanket. That was to be my room. My suitcase was already there. A dented cup sat on top, along with a picture frame, cracked at the corner. I picked it up. It was from our 36th anniversary. We were standing in front of the rose garden, my husband's arm around me, my hand on his chest. Behind us, the house stood tall and proud. Back then, it felt like ours. But now that same picture had been taken off the hallway wall and hidden behind the fridge. I found it when I went to get some water, face down, stuck between a mop and a box of old energy bars. They didn't even want to look at it. Did they think I would notice? Or did they think I'd forget? They forget that I remember everything. I remember the night my husband fixed the ceiling fan in our bedroom. I remember the smell of cinnamon and sugar on Christmas mornings. I remember holding my son as he cried over not getting into the college he wanted, whispering, "You're still amazing." I remember making birthday cakes from nothing, driving to late soccer games, sewing curtains by hand to make this house feel like a home. But now I'm just in a way, a problem to solve, something to step around on the way to getting rich. Marcus came by my little bed later that evening with a folded towel and a plastic bottle of cheap shampoo. "These are for you," he said, putting them down like charity. "We'll eat dinner around 8. You can eat after we're done." I nodded. That's all I could do. That night, while they laughed over steak and wine in the dining room, I sat on the bed, opening a can of soup I had hidden from the kitchen. I had to use a house key to open it. No can opener was left for me. She made soup. He made millions. That's what they whispered earlier when they thought I wasn't listening. Dad built a business empire, one said. She built soup, like feeding people wasn't important, like warmth and care, and giving up things meant nothing because it didn't show up in a bank account. I made soup, yes, but I also made them. And now they were tearing me down with giggles and tape and tiny stickers. Being cruel is never loud. It's quiet, careful, polite, but it hurts just the same. Later, when the house was quiet, I went back to the fridge and carefully got the anniversary picture. I wiped the dust off the glass. I held it against my chest. This was once my home. I was once its heart. They may think they've erased me, but they've only reminded me of what I once gave and what I can still take back. And tomorrow, the lawyer calls, and I will answer with the voice they forgot I had. It started with a folder, old, worn, made of leather. I kept it under the loose floorboard in the utility room, now my bedroom, behind a box of cleaning stuff nobody ever touched. Inside were things they never thought to ask about, because they never asked about me. The morning after they measured my room to turn it into something else, I took the folder and walked 5 blocks in the cold to the payphone outside the drugstore. They had accidentally turned off my cell phone, but I remembered the number. When Mr. Johnson answered, I just said, "It's time." He didn't ask what I meant. He just said, "Come in tomorrow." Mr. Johnson had been my husband's lawyer for many years. But what they didn't know is he had also been mine long before the marriage became an act, long before I faded into the background. The next day in his office, I put out the papers one by one. First, the joint trust paper. My name was right there next to my husband's, not as someone who just watched, not as someone who depended on him, as a partner, as someone in charge. Then the investment paper from Chase Bank, dated 19 years ago. It clearly showed the money I put in, my inheritance, my grandmother's sapphire jewelry, and the gold jewelry from my wedding. I sold them all quietly when my husband's company was about to fail. The money bought him the deal that saved his business. I never asked for credit. I only asked for him to survive. Last, I slid forward a bunch of handwritten pages, yellow with age, corners bent. Each one had my familiar handwriting. "It's the original business plan," I said softly. "The foundation for the big success." Mr. Johnson's eyes got narrow. You wrote this. I shook my head. I sent it. I sent it with a fake name. He turned it in under his name. I remembered that night clearly. My husband had been walking around the study, a glass of whiskey not touched on the desk. His business team had said no to every idea he'd shown them. I stayed up in bed after he went to sleep, got out a legal pad, and wrote until morning. By sunrise, my fingers were stained with ink. I never told him it was mine. I mailed it to the company's mailbox with no return address. He showed it at the next board meeting as his own idea. They approved it without question. It made him $44 million, and I never said a word. Mr. Johnson leaned closer. Can I see? He pulled out a file from his cabinet and took out a small envelope. Inside was another letter, typed but signed E. Sinclair, the same fake name I'd used on the handwritten one. I watched as he compared the signatures. Do you still write like this? He asked. I nodded. He called in an expert that very afternoon, a handwriting specialist from Arizona State University. They spent 3 hours together, looking at loops and curves, how hard I pressed, where I paused. Later that week, the expert sent a report. The letters matched 100%, and the original work had intellectual property rules. Copyright and ownership belonged to me. According to federal patent law, the business method, the real estate plan, was considered an invention because it had never been officially transferred, and I could prove I wrote it. The royalty rights came back to me. Millions, maybe more, depending on how long they made money. All mine. Mr. Johnson looked at me across his shiny wooden desk and said, Do you understand what this means? I nodded. I don't want all the money, I said. What do you want? I folded the letter back into the folder and stood up. I want my voice back. And for the first time in months, I let myself smile. A small, knowing smile that started in my chest and moved to my lips. They buried me while I was still thinking. They thought quiet meant useless, that love meant disappearing, that being a mother meant giving up everything. They thought I'd faded like old wallpaper, but I was just watching and remembering. I had not forgotten who I was. I was the girl who read business law by candlelight while her husband slept. The woman who taught herself investment tricks with library books. The mother who made soup, yes, but also decisions. Smart ones. Now, as they fought over each other to cut up a house I helped build, they had no idea the foundation under their feet had my name on it, and the paper trail was already with the court. By the time they sat down for the will reading, everything would be ready. But first I would let them have their party, their games, their jokes. Let them dance around thinking I had already blown away because they had forgotten me, and that was their biggest mistake. But there was someone else who remembered the truth, someone who would change everything. 2 days before the will reading, someone unexpected came to my door. A nice woman with gray hair and smart eyes, Dr. Amanda Foster, my husband's old business partner from 20 years ago, the one person who had seen my late-night talks about business plans, who had watched me draw building designs on napkins during dinner parties. Rose, she said, hugging me warmly. I heard about Robert's death. I also heard about how they're treating you. She had flown in from Seattle just to come to the will reading. Not because she was sad, but because it was right. I have something that belongs to you, she said, pulling out a manila envelope. Inside were copies of old project notes. Notes I had written in the margins of Robert's early ideas, fixes and new thoughts that had guided his most successful projects. I kept these all these years, she explained. I always knew the smart ideas weren't all his. You were the unrecognized genius behind half his projects. Amanda had become a successful real estate developer herself, running a company worth hundreds of millions. What she said would matter. Even my family couldn't ignore it. The will reading was held in downtown Miami, in one of those glass buildings that reached the sky. They made me sit at the end of the table, a folding chair, of course, because heaven forbid I mess up the look of their nice suits and designer purses with my old lady presence. The law office was modern, all glass walls and leather, cold in every way. Outside, it was hot and sunny. Inside, it felt like winter. My son Marcus sat closest to the front, legs crossed like he owned the place, wedding rings shiny. His wife whispered something in his ear. He laughed just loud enough for everyone to hear. "She'll be dead by next spring," he said quietly, drinking from a free coffee cup. "Don't expect a dime from her." My granddaughter was texting under the table. My grandson was practicing writing his signature on a legal pad. None of them looked at me, but Dr. Foster sat right across from them, calm and strong, which made Marcus shift around uncomfortably. Mr. Johnson walked in with his briefcase, and everyone sat up straight. He always seemed final, like when he spoke, that was the end of arguments. "Thank you all for being here," he started. "Today we are here to carry out the final wishes of Mr. Robert Thompson as written in his legally binding updated will." Nobody noticed he emphasized the word updated. Some folders were passed around, some pages were turned, and then Mr. Johnson reached into his case and took out a small silver voice recorder. He pressed play. My husband's voice filled the room, slower than I remembered, more tired, but clear and calm. "If my son ever says mean things about his mother," he said, "take away $60,000 each time." Silence. It was like all the air got sucked out of the room. The voice continued. "The security system recorded everything. Count them all." There was a moment of shocked stillness, then the sound of a pen falling from Marcus's hand. "What the hell does that mean?" he asked, leaning forward. "That's not real. That's not in the..." Mr. Johnson held up one hand and slid a printed paper across the table. The heading said, "Exhibit A, verified audio transcript, home security system, kitchen, 9 days after funeral." He turned the page. 1. She's still breathing. 2. Thought she'd be gone by now. 3. Check her pulse at the will reading. 4. She made soup. He made millions. He kept going. The room got colder with each entry. 912 total recorded statements considered, saying mean things about his mother, Mr. Johnson concluded. That totals $54.72 million in deductions. However, some were particularly nasty. The remaining $37.28 million was subtracted as penalty as per Clause 16C in Mr. Thompson's edition. He turned the final page. Remaining inheritance for Mr. Marcus Thompson, $0. Marcus jumped from his seat. "This is crazy. You can't do this. That woman, she's been a burden for years. Dad wouldn't." "He would," I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken all morning. Everyone turned. My voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. Mr. Johnson continued, calm as always. "Now, as for the primary beneficiary of the trust, the copyrights, and remaining estate assets, Mr. Robert Thompson has left them to his wife, Mrs. Rose Thompson." He handed me the folder. It was heavier than I expected. Inside were the house papers, the money transfers, the rights to the smart property tied to the business patents. A second folder, smaller, held papers for a penthouse in Seattle and a letter, written by hand. "My dearest Rose, forgive me for the years I let your light stay hidden. I never forgot. I only hoped someday they would see what I did. If they couldn't, then let this speak louder than I ever could. You built this with me. Now, let the world know your name." Marcus stood frozen, face white. His wife started calling someone, probably a lawyer, a therapist, a priest. I looked around at the room full of people who had practiced their victory speeches on the drive over, and I said nothing because justice doesn't need noise. It just needs truth. I got my coat. It was the same old brown one they had called ugly last Christmas. I walked slowly past Marcus, whose hand was squeezed into a fist on the shiny table. As I passed the coat rack, I turned to Mr. Johnson. "Is that all?" He nodded. "Enjoy Seattle." And I smiled, but not before turning back to the family I had fed, clothed, sheltered, and finally outlived. "You buried me while I was still thinking," I said, steady and clear. Too bad I had one more idea left. The quiet after the will reading wasn't just awkward, it was bone deep. But I wasn't done. Mr. Johnson knew that. He pointed to the second envelope. This, he said, opening the packet carefully, is about an intellectual property matter not previously told to the family. He put a series of papers on the table. 19 years ago, shortly before Thompson Properties avoided bankruptcy, through a game-changing business strategy, an anonymous proposal was mailed in. The method presented in that proposal became the blueprint for the company's most profitable projects. He turned to page 2. This patent was formally filed under a fake name, E. Sinclair, at the time assumed to be a consultant or anonymous strategist. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What does this have to do with anything? It was Dad's company, his vision. Mr. Johnson calmly flipped to the third page. It has everything to do with this, Mr. Thompson, because we recently finished forensic analysis on the original drafts of that proposal, including ink composition, handwriting comparison, and timing of postal submission. He slid a certificate across the table. The fake name was hers, he said, pointing to me. Your mother, Mrs. Rose Thompson. Gasps. Even the air in the room seemed to stop. Dr. Foster leaned forward. I can back this up. Rose was the unacknowledged co-developer on many of Robert's early projects. I have paperwork spanning 2 decades. This, Mr. Johnson continued, holding up a framed certificate, is the formal recognition of Mrs. Rose Thompson as sole intellectual contributor to Patent US 19-94-357B, also known as the Thompson Development Model. The patent now gets money through multiple licensing streams, totaling $10.8 million every year. Marcus's wife grabbed her purse. Emma, my granddaughter, dropped her phone. But Marcus just stammered. She made soup. She sewed clothes. And Mr. Johnson allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Yes. And she saved your father's legacy. He pulled a folded letter from a separate envelope, a little aged but still clear. Before his death, Mr. Thompson left this personal note, sealed and notarized. He cleared his throat and read out loud. She found the answer before the world knew there was a question. She kept quiet because she loved me. I asked her to let me take the credit because the investors wouldn't trust a woman's vision. But I knew, I always knew, this company is her mind on paper. A sharp breath from the back of the room, the kind that belongs to someone realizing everything they thought they knew has broken like glass. Marcus muttered something under his breath. What was that? I asked, looking right at him. He looked up, finally looked at me. I didn't know, he said, voice quieter. I didn't know it was you. I didn't answer because I'd spent years erasing my name so his father could look whole. I'd kept my name off the awards. I'd burned the drafts. I'd even mailed the final proposal from a different zip code. But I hadn't forgotten. Mr. Johnson passed around one last page, a record of every quarterly payment the patent had earned since it started. All signed to a holding trust, untouched, waiting. Here, he said, handing me a black folder with gold trim. It's yours now. Emma spoke up, her voice strangely small. So, we were living off her brain all along? Nobody replied. They were all too busy staring at their reflections in the glass walls, wondering how they missed the most important mind in the house because it was covered by an apron. I stood up. They didn't stop me. Not this time. I drew the plans, I said quietly, buttoning my coat. And you all thought they appeared by magic. Nobody moved as I left. The same woman who had once been dismissed as furniture, as fading wallpaper, had just reminded them that empires rise on the backs of women too smart to be seen and too strong to be erased. They were given 48 hours. That's what the letter said, signed by the executor, stamped by the court. A legal deadline for the ungrateful to leave the house they once trampled. By morning, the packing started. Boxes crashed down the hallway. Laughter, for once, was gone. Emma didn't say a word. Her eyes were red, but her hands moved fast, putting jewelry into velvet boxes that didn't belong to her anymore. Marcus tried. Please, Mom. That's all he could manage before his voice broke. I looked at him. This man who once sat on my lap to read picture books, who used to hold my hand during thunderstorms, now reduced to a shaking shadow asking for a second chance. I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that. I simply said, "You spoke first." The will simply listened. He fell back like the truth had hit him harder than any slap. Outside the kitchen, I heard his wife yelling into her phone. She's heartless. This old woman is heartless. I stepped into the doorway. No, I said. I gave you a home. You gave me hell. She opened her mouth again, but I was done giving her my ears. I walked through the house slowly, gently, like I was meeting something sacred again. The hallway still smelled faintly of old lemons and sunlight, but it was no longer cluttered with greed. I passed by the guest room, now empty of its meditation space dreams and renovation plans. The little sticker on the mirror caught my eye. This one's mine. I peeled it off, folded it once, and threw it in the trash. Room by room, I gathered them all. The blue one on the antique dresser, the yellow one on the armchair with my husband's initials, even the green one on the silver frame of our wedding photo. This one's mine, they had said. Not anymore. Not ever really. They just thought kindness was permission. In the dining room where laughter once lived, I stopped by the grand piano. Someone had put a sticker there too. I closed the lid gently. That one was always his, I whispered, and he gave it to nobody. The house felt still, not empty, just clean, like it had been holding its breath too long and could finally breathe out. Outside, I stepped onto the back porch. The roses were gone, dug up last summer for a wine-tasting corner. But the orange tree still stood crooked beside the window, its roots stubborn, its bark split from too many summers. And there, near the base, was the little rose bush I planted when Marcus turned 6. Just one thin stem remained. Thorns bare, leaves curled, forgotten. I knelt down, knees against the cool tiles. The ground was dry, bone dry. I got the watering can from behind the shed, half rusted but still useful. I poured slowly, listening to the soil drink. As the water sank in, I whispered, "We bloom again." Because we would, not because they believed it, but because I never stopped taking care of the roots. The wind picked up then, brushing across the porch, carrying with it a strange silence, the kind that comes after a house has been taken back. This house wasn't haunted anymore. It was mine. I sold the house the following spring. Not because I was angry, not for revenge, just because it no longer felt like mine. Some places collect too much noise and no amount of cleaning can quiet what's been said inside the walls. With the sale done, I moved into a small penthouse near the ocean in Santa Barbara. The kind of place with big windows, white curtains, and the sound of waves always just a breath away. No creaky stairs, no whispers behind doors, no stickers claiming what never belonged to them. Just peace and room for me to think out loud this time. The money from the patent kept coming, steady and quiet. But I didn't need it. Not all of it. So I started something new. A fund. A small foundation with a long name. Women Who Were Erased. It wasn't fancy. It didn't have a big party or a ribbon cutting. Just a bank account, a mission, and enough money to offer scholarships, grants, and above all, recognition to women who had built quietly and been forgotten loudly. I knew what that felt like. I knew how much it hurt to whisper brilliance into someone else's spotlight. And I knew how good it felt to take that spotlight back. Outside my front door, I hung a wooden sign. It was hand-carved from the old oak tree my husband and I once planted together. I kept a piece when the storm split it years ago. The sign read, "This house was funded by a burden. Enjoy the silence." It made the mailman chuckle every time. Inside, I didn't keep much, just basics and a few memories. One of them, a faded drawing taped to the fridge, crayon on construction paper, drawn by my youngest grandson years before they taught him to roll his eyes at me. A stick figure of me in big glasses standing next to a giant light bulb. In bright purple scribble it said, "To Grandma. You think better than Google." I'd almost thrown it away once, back when they told me I was losing my mind, that my memory was slipping, that I should just sit, smile, and stay quiet. But I didn't forget this drawing, and I never forgot how to think. They had buried me in assumptions. Old, tired, fading, useless. But I wasn't any of those things. I was patient. I was watching. I was remembering what they wanted erased. And most importantly, I was still thinking because I never stopped. They thought I was fading, but I was just waiting for the right moment to think out loud. What would you do if your own family treated you like garbage while you were still alive? How far would you go to reclaim what's rightfully yours? These aren't just questions about inheritance. They're about dignity, respect, and the value we place on the people who sacrifice the most. Is it ever too late to stand up for yourself? And when kindness is mistaken for weakness, how do you show your true strength? If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or pushed aside, just remember, your story isn't over until you decide it is. Rose was more than a mother, more than a wife, more than a woman in the background. She was the mind that built the map. And when they erased her, she rewrote the ending. Think about the women in your life who've been the quiet heroes behind someone else's success. How many brilliant ideas have gone uncredited? How many sacrifices have been forgotten? If this story moved you, imagine how many others are still waiting to be heard. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories for more real tales of strength, justice, and the women who refuse to disappear quietly. Because silence may be golden, but truth is priceless. Before you go, ask yourself this: what legacy are you building, and who are you building it with? Are you lifting others up, or are you stepping on them to reach higher? The choice is always yours, just like it was Rose's, and just like it can be yours too.